Hey everybody, Professor Snark checking in. So we are into our last week of our 8-week class here. So right down to the very end. Today is Monday, which is the first due date within the final unit here. Basically what I have you doing for this first due date is hopefully submitting what is pretty close to a completed paper. Certainly there might be a few gaps for some people, but hopefully you're fairly far along in the writing process. So you've submitted your close to complete paper to the discussion board for this first half of Unit 11 here, basically to get some feedback from those within your peer response group. And so you can find the groups, and I'm just going to click into it myself here, in the first half of Unit 11. So what often happens is that people submit their file fairly late, maybe even today or tonight, so it's really hard to get that as part of the group and then read it and provide feedback in time. So even if you don't get the feedback back to people right away, at least be sure that your paper is submitted to the discussion board for review, and hopefully today or maybe by Tuesday, tomorrow, you can provide some feedback to those who've submitted papers. If students haven't submitted something by that point, then obviously you're not responsible as part of the group. So your main concern is just to submit your paper on time for the peer feedback. Once you get that feedback returned to you, and you might get one or two people, maybe more ideally, but at least one or two, you'll have some ideas about maybe certain changes you want to make, whether it's overall things or more likely just sentence level things, or maybe source issues or citation issues. Hopefully fairly minor things at this point. And then we look to our last due date, which is this Friday, October 14th. Basically, you're just submitting the final paper. So the remainder of the class and the bulk of this week is really just finishing up the final paper and submitting it. There's a couple of additional little discussion board things as we sort of wrap things up, but obviously your primary focus is the paper. So like I said before, now is a really good time to, of course, sort of take stock of your week as far as time management goes. When are you going to complete these various tasks that you have left in front of you? Can you devote a solid chunk of time at some point to giving that final paper a couple of last read-throughs just for editing purposes? Go back to Unit 9 and read the requirements to be sure that you haven't kind of lost sight of basic things like number and type of sources. Obviously making sure they're appropriate, they're direct discussions of the primary text, not something tangential or just vaguely related. You have both the database and also the print secondary source that you've used, in addition to the two others. So you have a total of 4 secondary sources. And of course, any final questions that you might have for me as you're tying everything together. Now, you again, ask earlier rather than later, so you're not really panicking towards the end. The other thing to note is that while the due date is Friday, which means the very end of the day on Friday, if you're feeling like everything is pretty much together and it's Thursday or Wednesday or earlier, and you just want to have the paper off of your hands, off your plate, you can by all means submit early. One of the things that I do ask is that you let me know whether or not you want the paper returned to you with comments or you just need the grade. Either way is perfectly fine. There's no kind of value judgment or anything associated with those. But just let me know. If I don't get that from you, or if you don't let me know one way or the other, I'll just assume that you don't really need the paper back and just provide the grade. Again, no big deal. Just let me know when you submit it. The other benefit to submitting, excuse me, a little bit early if you can, even if it's later on Thursday or maybe early on Friday, is that if there are problems, technical issues that you run into, the file doesn't open for me correctly, all those weird things that can happen at the worst possible time, I will get back in touch with you ASAP. So you want to really be checking your email, your student email, and checking into Blackboard maybe the day after or even a little while after, later in the day, that you submit, just to make sure everything went through correctly and it's all copacetic. And I think that's about it. I may check in one last time as we get closer to our final due date. And as always, if you have some final questions here as we wrap things up, be sure to be in touch with me.